Ayin Zayin would be 77b. We'll start from the line just above the wide lines. At the two dots. Ayin Zayin would be 77b. Toward the end of the page, right? We just review a little bit what we saw yesterday. Okay. 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 So basically, we have the opinion of Reb Shimon Gamliel. Reb Shimon Gamliel says that basically, if somebody's selling a house and makes a partial payment, don't allow the partial payment to effectuate a undoing of the sale. So how do you do that? What you do is you say that the partial payment represents the payment plus the rest of the payment is turned into a loan. And because it's a loan now, so effectively you made full payment and you owe money because of a loan. So the sale can never be undone because you didn't complete the payment. So the reason is specifically because you introduced a clause in the contract that specifies effectively that a full payment was given, but the remainder of the balance was turned into a loan. But if he didn't write it, then then you would not acquire the full value of the field. Again, the Gemara asks, "Vatanya we learned somebody gives a collateral to his friend. If I change my mind, this collateral belongs to you. If the seller says, if I change your mind, I'll give you back double your collateral. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi says that this is a valid condition. And Rabbi Yossi is l'tameid, Amar smachta kanya. This is an asmachta because the guy has full intention of making the full payment. And therefore, the possibility of non-payment is not a... It's not expected to be a realistic possibility, and therefore, according to the mainstream opinion, it would not work. But Rabbi Yossi says that asmachta does work, so this is a valid condition. Rabbi Yehudah says, "Daesh yikna keneged arvaynei." Rabbi Yehudah says that you are kind of according to the amount of the collateral. So the collateral represents 50% of the payment, and you acquire 50%. One second. I'm sorry. Skip the line. Shmuel says, when is this true? If he said his collateral should acquire. Okay. In other words, if he says my collateral should acquire, the amount that it's worth, let's say it's $500, so then he acquires according to the amount of his collateral. Rav Shimon says if he was paying him in cash, he paid him 50% of the cash, then the field is sold and the rest of it's a loan. Effectively, Rav Shimon is saying even without a specific clause, making a large payment on a property constitutes full payment and the remainder is turned into a loan. Okay, so it seems to be this contradiction. The Gemara says, basically, it depends on the seller. Is the seller desperate for money? So if the seller is desperate for money, he's constantly calling up the buyer to get money from him. So then we say that, look, the seller wants the money now. He needs the money now. So because of that, we say that, look, if you don't make the full payment, he doesn't want the money in 8 years from now. He wants it now. So if you don't make the full payment now, you only acquire according to the amount of money that you've given, unless you've made a condition specifying the remainder of the money should be a loan. However, if he's if the guy is not desperate for money, so then we presume that the condition is implied, even if it wasn't specified. Rava says, one second. Rava said, "Hi man, somebody who sold something to his friend." 1 second. And the guy was pestering the buyer for money. Loikani. 1 second. The guy sells his field. Similar story. His friend makes a partial payment. If the guy's desperate for money, so then there is not a full kinyan. But if he's not desperate for money, then it constitutes a full kinyan. This is the classical move when the court rules against you. So basically, a guy borrows $10,000, and he pays the guy back in pennies. Not only that, he doesn't even pay back in pennies in one day. Like every day, he dumps a whole bag full of pennies at the guy's door. Exactly. So he gives him. So the guy's being. It's like this is the oldest move to do when you're upset at the courts.
Right.
Okay, it is considered a payment. However, the lender is entitled to be upset. He has a legitimate reason to be upset here. You're making it very difficult for me by giving me these bag of pennies every day. There was somebody who paid his he sold a donkey to his friend. And the buyer was missing a single dollar from the payment. And the seller was hounding the buyer for this last penny, small amount of money. Rashi's thinking, what's the story in this scenario? Do we say that because of this last coin, because the guy's pestering over it, he's being annoying? Do we say that sort of potentially invalidates the rest of the payment because he hasn't made a full payment yet? And certainly the last payment isn't a loan, because you see here clearly the guy is going crazy over the last coin. Or do we say maybe not, because it's just one coin, it's a small amount, we do consider it to be a loan. One coin, $1 is like $10. And it's an obstacle for the kinyan to be completed. So Ravacha, the son of Rav Yosef, says to Rashi, what about the fact that Rava said that you do acquire the field if the guy is missing a payment of the buyer is missing a payment of just one coin? So the Gemara says, so while it's true that Rava said that even a dollar could that if it's just $1, it will not impact the sale. The reason for that is we're talking about a guy who sells the field with a rasa. Rasa is sort of it's potentially problematic. The field maybe is on the list to be confiscated by the king. Maybe didn't pay his taxes. Some very problematic reasons. So obviously, if I remember I once went into a store to buy something. The guy immediately dropped the price by 3/4 and got me to buy it. And then I came home and I realized the item was broken.
Oh.
Yeah. So you think you're getting a bargain, it's not quite, right? So, in this case, had I told the guy, well, I don't have $1, I'll come back and pay you $1 tomorrow, he would have done it too. He would be pestering me for the $1, but he would have done it because there was some problem with the field that's causing him to sell it immediately. So in other words, what Rav is saying is as follows: if the field is deeply problematic and the guy sells it and you pay him 99% of it, then the sale is valid because he'd rather the sale be valid and lose that last coin than undo the sale. So therefore, we consider like in a standard scenario, we consider the field to be completely sold, and and the last dollar is considered a loan. So Gemara says pshita. It's obvious. Okay, so a guy needed $100 for some urgent need that came up. So what did he do? So he tried selling his $100 field. The problem is it was too small. There were no buyers. So he said, you know what? I'll sell the $200 field. And the guy sells the $200 field, and then he chases the buyer for the money. In this scenario, the buyer does not acquire the field if he makes a partial payment. And the reason for this is because the seller would like the full amount of the money, so that half of it he can use for whatever urgent need he had, and the other half he can use to buy an additional property worth 100 coins. The Tarach have ashkach, below Tarach was of Messiah. Okay, let's say a guy, he could have sold a $100 field, except that he was lazy about it. He wasn't interested in waiting around in the market. So what did he do? He sold it for $200. 1 second. He sold a different property for $200. And the guy is he's chasing the borrower for money. So is this considered as if, do we say that because he's chasing for money, he wants full payment immediately? Or do we say that no, he'd rather sell the property as soon as possible so he gets the $100? So this is actually in the category of Meicher Sadeh Bnei Rasa. There's a compelling reason here for him to sell the field immediately. So even if he doesn't get full payment, the sale would still be valid because he needs the money and he's not interested in waiting around for it. So Gemara says, "Teiku, let it stand. It remains unresolved." Sachar as a chomer as a kadar sachar le'mamadan. So he hires these people, these schleppers or a potter, wagon driver, or a kadar is someone who makes pottery. And they withdraw from the job, so you can take their wages and use that money to hire somebody else, or matan, or you could trick them into continuing on the job. So Gemara says, "Ad Kamma seichar aleim." How much so you're allowed to basically charge the original tradesman for the work that the work that the next tradesman will need to do to finish the job. Well, how much? How much? So Amar Nachman ad k'dei schar. In other words, you don't have to pay him unless there's extra money. Meaning, let's say the job was 8 coins, and the guy did 2 coins worth of work, but the remainder of the job is also going to cost the same 8 coins. So then they don't get paid anything. Let's say the remainder of the job will cost 10 coins, so then they still don't get paid anything, and nor do they have to pay. And if the remainder of the job will be 4 coins or 6 coins, then they'll get their 2 coins. So Rav and Sister Nachman at our Baal Mechamishim Zuz. The Brisa seems to indicate that even 40 to 50 zuz, meaning even much more than their actual wages. If they've accepted the responsibility to finish a job and they didn't, even if wages go up such that they actually have to pay somebody to finish it, they would have to pay. Amar Lei, so Rav Nachman says, Kitanya hi shebasa chavila liyadai. That scenario is a scenario where the workers come with their own tools, their own equipment. So the owner still has the worker's equipment. So he's allowed to withhold that equipment as payment until his job is finished. Okay. Mishnah. Okay, so a guy rents a donkey to take it to a mountain route. He took it to a valley route. Or the opposite, the bika to take it to the valley, to take it to the mountains. I feel even if they're both equidistant. Umesa and the animal dies, chayev, you're liable. Now we get to another scenario which is similar, although we'll have to see in the Gemara what the distinction is. Guy rents a donkey to bring it through the mountains. But he ends up bringing it through the valley. If the animal tripped, Potter, he's exempt. Okay, so let's explain that typically the mountains are more rocky, so it's more likely that an animal to trip and fall and hurt itself. The valleys, on the other hand, are hotter and much more of a stale air. Typically the valleys, the mountains block the wind. Okay, 1 second. So the guy hired the animal to go in the mountains. He took it through the valleys, and the animal tripped and fell over rocks. Potter, he's exempt because it had nothing to do with his decision. But if the animal got too hot and died from exhaustion, chayav, he is liable. Why? Because the mountains are cooler. The guy was supposed to take it in the valley. He took it up to the mountain. If it trips, then chayav, you're liable because that's a hazard that's probably more likely to happen in the mountain. But if the animal overheated in the mountain, it got heat stroke or something, or heat exhaustion, if the animal died from heat exhaustion, so then the renter is exempt. Why is he exempt? Because heat exhaustion is not something that typically happens in the mountains. Hang on for the question. Hold on. But if the heat exhaustion happened because of the vertical climb, because the animal was exerting itself too much, in other words, not because the atmosphere or the air was hot and stale. It wasn't, obviously, it was in a mountain, but because the animal was exerting itself. So then chayav, that is the type of hazard that often happens in the mountain, and therefore you're liable for it because you weren't supposed to take it in the mountain. Okay. Somebody rents a chamor and something called hivrika happened to it. We'll have to see what hivrika is, but one of the explanations in hivrika is that the animal's vision became extremely poor. Or it was drafted, right? This happens sometimes during wartime, or in previous times, even not during wartime. If you had the king's messenger, so you started off with a horse, and you had your letter, and you switched horses constantly, and everyone was and if you found a horse on the trail and somebody else's horse, they were obligated to give you that horse. And you'd give him the king's messenger would give him the first horse. Okay, so the horse was drafted, or it had some sort of vision problem. So Aimerlai, the lesser tells the lessee that Harei Shalach Lefanecha, look, I rented you an animal, you still have an animal, the rental is still valid, so go take it. You can't take it, that's nothing to do with me. In other words, over here the question is the leaser, the lesser, is he obligated to provide a new animal to replace the leased animal that now is, for technical reasons, no longer usable? And the answer is no, because the animal is usable. It just might have some sort of vision problem, or it might be that the king's messenger is riding on top of it, but the animal's still there. However, let's say the animal suddenly drops dead or breaks a bone in the normal course of work, then the lesser has to provide the lessee with a new work animal to finish the job. Okay. In the first scenario of the Mishnah says you were supposed to take it in the valley, you took it in the mountain, chayav, you're liable. You're supposed to take it in the mountain, you took it in the valley, you're also liable. And the second scenario starts breaking it down. Well, why did the animal die? Did it trip or did it overheat? Mm-hmm. Okay. What's the difference? The first scenario is where it died because of the air quality. Now, I don't know. I don't quite understand I don't know, maybe there is a modern interpretation for this, but this doesn't seem to have a common theme throughout Talmud, which is that this air quality would kill people. I don't know how it worked or why it happened, but it would kill a rather large amount of people. It's a matter of
air pollution.
It obviously was much worse than air pollution, because this was not this would, there's a word called a magefa. Magefa is usually not considered a contagious disease. A magefa is when 3 people out of 500 die per day at that ratio for 3 days straight. And most of the commentators pointed out that magefa has something to do with the sudden change in the ear, such that people die so quickly. So this seems to be it. So basically the animal is experiencing this change of the ear from the mountain to the valley, and it's killing it. So in that case, there's no difference about why exactly it died. We know why it died. It died because of the ear quality and something to do with the ear, and then you have to make the lesser whole again because you didn't listen to instructions. Rav Yossi says it died because of fatigue. It was overworked, and this is true both in the valley and in the mountain. It's true in the mountain because the mountain requires more work, so fatigue is easier to set in, and it's true in the valley because the valley doesn't have the winds, the same winds. So the quality of the ear, or the amount of the air the animal's breathing while it's working, is not as good as the mountain. And therefore, you're responsible for the animal dying from fatigue in both scenarios. It doesn't make any difference, if fatigue played a role, then you're liable. Okay, obviously, by the way, we're talking about donkeys. Some donkeys are experienced in the mountains, some donkeys are experienced in the valleys. I guess it probably depends on, what the animal's experience was or where the animal was raised or something like that. Apparently, these were 2 types of donkeys. There were mountain donkeys and there were valley donkeys. Okay, Rabba says, we're talking about a scenario where a snake bit the animal. For a second. Okay, so I'll read here with one of the interpretations of the Yossi. It's the first interpretation, which is how I understood the Gemara when I learned it last night, which is that both the explanation of fatigue and the explanation of die by snake bite is explained by the following. It's explained by the opinion of Rav Meir. Nikra, top of 78b, Nikra Gaslam. Anyone who changes from the instructions of the owner is considered a thief. So basically, even if it died from a snake bite, you might think a snake bite is not quite a mountain problem or a valley problem. It could happen in both scenarios. But it doesn't make a difference. You did not listen to the instructions, therefore you're responsible. And the same thing is true of fatigue, to a lesser extent, although obviously the terrain obviously plays some sort of role. Hi, so Gemara says, hi, Rav Meir. How do we know that Rav Meir says that if you change from what the owner instructed you, you're considered a thief? So Gemara proposes, Ilay Rav Meir Tsevat, the opinion of Rav Meir of dying. So you remember we spoke about the guy who painted the house black, right? So now we learned, no. Or the guy took a garment and he colored it the wrong color. And he told him to make it red, and the guy went and turned it black. Or Shachar Mitzavi Odom was supposed to be black and he turned it red. Rameir says the dyer is responsible for reimbursing the one who owns the materials. He is a damager. He's a nezikin. This goes back to Bava Kamma. This is not right. He damaged them. Damage you have to pay. It's that simple. Yehudah says no, not so fast. Depends. Is the clothing worth more than before or not? And is that increase in the question is that increase in value more or less than the fee for dying? If it's more than the fee, then you pay the fee. If it's less than the fee, then you pay the increase in value, not the fee. Okay, clearly here, Reb Yehudah is saying you make a change, you're not a thief. You just have the lower hand. You have the lower hand of the deal. And according to Rav Meir, you change something, you're basically a thief. You have to pay for damages. So the Gemara says, "Mimai." That's not a good source because over there he actually engaged in action. The dyer acquires the item by making a physical change to it. But how do you know that principle could be applied even where you didn't actually make a physical change to the item? In other words, Ramirez's scenario here is where you physically transformed the garment. In the case, now we're trying to apply Rameir to a case where he didn't touch the donkey; he just sent it on a different road. It's not quite a direct comparison. Elahor Rameir, this second version of Rameir, as follows: the Magvis Purim of the collection of Purim. So as we know, on Purim there's a mitzvah of Matanas L'Avyanim. What is this mitzvah? Giving charity. What's the mitzvah of giving charity? So the primary obligation of charity is to make sure all the poor people can afford a nice seuda, a nice meal on Purim. As a matter of fact, the quantity of money is the minimum quantity to buy a dignified meal. What's a dignified meal? So some of the prices say it's a lox bagel with a coffee. So I guess Alan charged for a lox bagel and coffee, maybe $15 or so, something like that. So it'll be $15. And the price can talk about the number, maybe it's 10, 5, 20, somewhere around there. That's the amount of money you need for an honorable Purim. Okay, so time to be learned. I give us Purim, so you collect the money for the poor people to make them a Suda. So it's the Purim. You do it. Why are we collecting all this money? So that the poor have an honorable Suda's Purim. My Geva Seir, if you collect for a local town, right? So the community needs to raise money for its poor. So, but the thing though is this community's campaign goes viral, and they raise a crazy amount of money. The ain medaktikim bedover. The same thing happened on Purim. They raised much more than they needed. The ain medaktikim bedover. They are not exacting with the money, and this is true today as well. I've known places that practice this. Basically, they collect money for Purim, and they give out large checks. They don't give out a coupon for a coffee and a lox bagel. They give out, I don't know, $200-$300 checks, maybe larger, depending on the size of the family, 500, 1,000. Mm-hmm. Now, are they going to spend all $1,000 on the Sudas Purim? Probably not. They'll probably spend a good few hundred of it on a Sudas Purim, but not all of it. So what do they do with the rest of it? I don't know. They use it to pay down their loans, to buy their kids a set of shoes or something. And that's permitted. We're not exacting to make sure that the money of Purim remains in Purim. The money of this city's poor people remains with this city's poor. And also, so before the days of refrigeration, so on Purim, right? So they raised a lot of money. They decided, you know what? They're going to buy meat for all the poor people. So how do you buy meat? You buy a cow, you slaughter the cow, and you give the meat to the poor. Now, obviously, slaughter a cow, it's a lot of meat. There's a lot of extra meat. So what do? They sold the meat, and at regular prices, and that money was kept for the poor people at a later time, and that's also permitted. Even though technically speaking, it's not Purim money, it wasn't used for Purim, but it's permitted. Rabbi Yehudah says, "My gave Purim. Rabbi Yehudah says, no. The money of Purim, you got to use it for Purim expenses. You can't even use it to buy yourself a shoelace. Unless the community board members were notified." And this is Rav Shimon Gamliel is quoting here the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov that heard this from Rameir. Again, so what did he hear from Rameir? You collect for Purim, it must be for Purim, nothing else. Rav Shimon Gamliel himself was lenient. Okay. So clearly we see here that Rameir demands that if you make a change, you consider it a thief. So Gemara says, over there it's a little different because the money was given specifically for Purim. And that's why if you misuse it, you're considered a thief. But who says that if you borrow an animal with a stipulated condition, the condition is as significant as the reason why you gave money for Purim, which is for Purim. No, that's precisely the point. They are. In other words, in the scenario of Purim, because you gave it for one reason only, it's considered as if you didn't give it for anything else. Whereas by a donkey, when you gave an instruction, it's just an instruction. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're not loaning it unless if they don't follow the instruction.
Like you rent a nice sedan and you go off road.
Yeah. Elahar Meir. So the Gemara says it's the following statement of Meir. The Tanya of Shimon Elazar Mishum Meir Hanais and Dinner Lani Likachle Chaluk. Basically, in the name of Rameir, it was said a guy gives $100 to a poor person to buy a coat. Laikach by talis, he shouldn't buy a shirt. Let's say he gives him the money to buy a shirt. Laikach by chaluk, he shouldn't buy a cloak. Why? Because he's changing what the owner had in mind. So Gemara says, "V'dilma shani hasan b'asal meshadei." The Amri inshi Amr planya zvinile levusha leplanya anya v'loy zavanlei. Inam is zvinile glima v'loy zavanlei. Okay, so the Gemara says, look, over here he bought the wrong item. Rameir says you're a thief. Can't do that. If he gave you money to buy a shirt, you have to buy a shirt. Why? Because if you change the intention of the owner, that constitutes thievery. So this similarly, if the owner says, "Don't take my donkey in the mountain," and you do, you're a thief. And if it dies from a snake bite, well, you have to pay for it. So Gemara proposes maybe there's a distinction here. Maybe the distinction is actually the reason why you can't use the money for a shirt to buy a cloak is because what happened? Why is the guy giving you money for a shirt? Presumably because they made some sort of collection in public, and he committed to buy the guy a shirt. Now the guy goes and buys a cloak. People are going to say he doesn't keep his words. So it's really a totally different reason. It's nothing to do with becoming a thief because you changed your opinion. The problem is because it looks like you don't. The poor person is not allowed to put the donor in a situation where it looks like he doesn't keep his word. Simar says that can't be. Why? Because im can listening the Brisa should give a different reason. The reason is because people will have suspicions that the donor is not keeping his words, which is a distinct category from actually being a thief because you change what the owner said. But he didn't say that Rameir did not say the reason was because people will have suspicions on the donor. He said the reason is because you changed from what the donor had in mind. The reason is because anyone who changes from the instruction of the owner or the donor is considered a thief. Okay. You rented a donkey and it had hivrika. So I already told you this Gemara, but it's interesting. Rashi in the Mishnah tells you, you'll see in the Gemara what exactly hivrika is. My hivrika, what is the hivrika? Basically, it got some sort of illness in the eye, and it can't. It's translate what nehurisa is. Is it cataract or something?
Oh,
We had to translate nehurisa as nehurisa. What?
not sure.
Yeah, here they translated it as a speck in the eye,
Speck in the eye. Okay.
Oh, speck in the eye.
which makes it blind.
Yeah. Okay. Speck in the eye. Swelling of the pupil. Okay. Okay. Fine. So Rava says avzagas, avazkas. An avazkas is some sort of parasite. It's like a worm. Apparently, it would eat the feet of the animals, so the animals would no longer be able to carry a burden. Okay. Hahuda Amarlahu avzagas b'milsa de malka. Now this type of parasite apparently can eat other things as well. So there was a guy who went to the king and he told him he saw these parasites in the king's treasures. So Amr Lei b'mai, what do you see it? B'talei kesef or b'talei dohav? In silver items or in gold items? Now Rashi explains it doesn't actually mean the metallic items because presumably a parasite cannot eat metal. So what did silver and gold mean? Do you see it in linen items or do you see it in wool items? Some say V'talei kesef amar v'katlu. He said he saw it in linen items and they killed him because apparently parasites don't eat linen. Eked Amrin, some say, but Talidav Amar v'Shavku. He said they were eating wool clothes, and they left him because apparently they were eating the wool clothing, and parasites can eat that type of clothing. Okay. Let's stop here. Okay. Tomorrow we'll talk about the draft. Okay.